Hello everyone, greetings from PayTabs technical support team. In this series, you will learn how to integrate with PayTabs through our PT2 APIs endpoints. And we will walk you through the first integration type, which is the PayTabs hosted payment page. For the purpose of this series, we have created a very simple Laravel project to walk you through the integration process. But feel free to follow the steps in this series with your own project, whatever the programming language or the frameworks used to integrate with PayTabs. So, let's get started. In this video, we are going to learn how we can handle the payment response inside our hosted payment page integration type in order to, let's say, redirect our customer or display the success or the error page for them. So, let's get started. The first thing you should know is that you can find the full documentation for this part inside PayTabs support portal under the article called the Hosted Payment Page APIs Integration Manual. Now, normally handling the payment responses, you can check inside the integration manual here through step 5 and step 6 for handling the post-payment responses. But you should actually also know that PayTabs offers different types of handling the payment responses that you can check all of them in our solution article. What are the 5 ways of receiving a transaction response? This solution article will guide you through all the available ways that PayTabs offers to you to receive or to handle the transaction response. So let's get back to our integration type. Here in the hosted payment page integration type, if we navigate it to step 5 over here, which is handling the payment response, we will see that handling the payment response in the hosted payment page done with something called the return URL. Now, simply the return URL is a URL that you provide inside the request payload, and after the payment is done, the PayTabs will be redirecting the customer to this URL that you provided, and along with it, PayTabs will be sending a post request that contains the simple transaction details, these details over here. It contains detail like the acquirer message, the acquirer RRN, the cart ID, the customer email, response code, response message, and response status, which are actually these three parameter or these three response parameter are the parameters that you are going to rely on to display any message or any success or error message. Also, we have a signature, which is something you can use to validate this request and make sure it comes from PayTabs for you, and the token if you are doing any token based transaction, and of course finally the transaction reference for this transaction. Now, before we look at this inside our code and we test it out, please note something very important, sorry. Now, this return URL is only a browser redirection. It's not a post request from PayTab server, meaning we don't recommend you relying on this response or make any database update based on this response. No, what we recommend to do is make any data update or any database update or any action to take relying or to do it relying on the post payment response clarified in step 6 as it's more reliable one. Now, this is only being handled for redirection and for simple redirection or viewing or displaying the success or the error page for your customers. Now, another thing you should know about this response or this return URL that it must be of type HTTPS. Like when we are providing the URL over here, you can see that I am providing a return URL over here. You can see that this URL is a type of, it's secured, it's HTTPS. Now, if it's not secured, the post request will not be sent to this URL. So the customer will be redirecting to this URL, but with no data sent from our side or from the browser side actually. Now, getting back to the parameter over here, it's a simple parameter. Actually, if we get back to step 3 over here, and we navigate it to part 2, you will see that this is one of the optional parameters that you can learn more about over here, because it's actually sent. It's a parameter that is sent inside the request payload. And you can see over here one of the validation rules that is recommended to pass it as an HTTPS URL. Otherwise, we reflect on the response behavior, meaning that we will not receive the full response. Now, as we saw earlier, the response, how it looks, the detail that we will be receiving in the return URL post request. So let's take a look at it inside our checkout page. So I will start by creating a very simple success or authorized request. So I will fill out all my details like that. I will choose PayTabs. I will proceed to payment over here. And I will actually also fill out my payment details correctly. I want to make, as I said, a successful transaction. And I will pay it over here. Now, as you can see here, that PayTabs redirected the customer, or redirected me actually, to this over here URL, the secured URL that I provided, and I have used the request details sent along with this URL redirection to display the message of the card ID and the transaction reference. Now, let's see the full response of this message. If I get back to my controller over here, you can see that I have made a symbol flag. This flag are for displaying the full payload. Of course, I don't want to display the full payload to my customer, so I will just now display it for you in order to see how the payload that I received. So I will change the flag to true. Now I will send this request again, and here we go. You can see this is the message I received once I opened, or once my URL got opened. I received a message containing the detail that we just talked about. I have used the response status over here to make sure, or to comply whether this is a successful transaction or not. I have used the message over here, let's say the message that's, yes, I don't have any authorized message over here. As I can see, the response message is authorized. I have only displayed the card ID and the transaction reference from here, from the transaction reference and the card ID. Now, this is just one scenario to go. Let's try another one where we will have here a response message where the customer did some kind of error, or there has been some kind of failure inside the payment. So I will go back to my homepage over here. I will create another successful payment. But this time, I will not, let's choose PayTabs, let's proceed to payment over here. I will not clear it to the end, so I will choose the card, and maybe I will give it a wrong CVV. So this CVV is the wrong one, the right one is 123 for this test card. And I will complete it over here. And as you can see, I have got redirected to the error view. I have displayed the message. Now, where did I get this message from? You can see over here inside the response message, I have used this message. Response message, and I have displayed here. So, of course, you don't need to use this whole message or this whole request. You can just use the status and the message to display it or redirect the way you want to. Now, sometimes there may be some messages or maybe some failure that you don't want to display it for your customers. You want to notice to your customer that there are an error and they should just contact you. So how could we do that? Simply by validating this response code or this response status. So to learn more about the response code and the response status, you can actually write over here inside our support portal, response code, yes, response status. And you will see here that we have a solution article that clarify the differences between the response code and the response status for you. And each one, what is the reason for it, what happened in it, you will see each one over here. So you can use these response status to choose what to display, what not to display. For example, if I am having an authentication issue, I don't want to know or to let my customer know that I am facing this authentication issue. So for example, let's get back to our code over here. I will go to the request payload over here. And instead of using the right profile ID, I will just mess up with the profile ID. I will choose any random number. And let's save it. And let's get back to the payment and reload the page. I will proceed. And as you can see, the actual message that I've received, that profile ID must be set. Now, I don't want my customer to know the profile ID or there is an issue inside the authentication. So I have just did some condition inside my view that if you ever receive the code of 1, for example, the response code of 1, just display this message for the customer. There has been an error in the payment. Kindly contact the store admin. So simply, this is how you can use the return URL do the redirection or to display the error or the success for your customers. Now, again, we highly recommend you that you rely on the post-payment response, not the payment response. The post-payment response we are going to learn. We are doing it with something called the callback in the next video. Now, an additional step that you can do to verify or to secure this response is by verifying that this response is coming from PayTabs or this redirection is happening from PayTabs. How can we do this verification? Actually, PayTabs offers you a way to do that. If we navigate it back to the return URL response solution article over here, we will find down here that we have a solution article called How to Verify the Response Received from PayTabs or Signature Verification. Now, along with either your callback response or the return response, you will find that PayTabs sends or gives you a signature. Now, you can use this signature to verify that this is the response coming to you, to yourself, from PayTabs. How can we do that? Here in this article, we will learn how to do that, and now we can test it out. So, of course, you can do this for the callback and the return, but now we need to just to check the return. So, simply assuming that this is the return you are received, and you have your server key, which will look something like this. The first thing you will do directly after finishing or receiving the response, the return your response, you will find the signature. Of course, after parsing the response, you will find the signature key and value, and you will remove the signature from the response. Now, after removing the signature from here, you will have something that looks like this. Now, the next thing you want to remove is to check if there are any empty parameters. For example, over here, you will see check for any empty one, and we will check how we can do this using a very simple code. But we will remove any empty parameters. After removing any empty parameters and having a response that looks like this, we will want to sort it out using the key sort or any kind of sorting that we will just take a look at in my sample right there. But we will sort it out to look like this. Once it's sorted out, the next thing we want to do a URL encoding. Now, this URL encoding actually also have a sample over here that we will see how we can do it. But once we do the URL encoding for this key and value response, the next thing will be hashing the value of this key and value URL encoded. And once it's encoded, we will do this hashing using the SHA-256 256 actually scheme along with your server key. Now you will use your server key and this key and value response, and you will hash it using the SHA-256 hashing scheme. Now I know this is a lot of literal steps, so let's see over this example over here. Actually, let's see it over in our code over here. Now I have done some changes to my return function over here, which will pass it first into a verified function. I see here I have created a function inside my payment repository that is called verify return. If we go to my payment repository over here to the verify return, we will see over here that I have the same function in this sample code. Here what is happening simply is what we just said. The first thing, we check that we don't have any empty response, and we check that we have the signature, and then simply as we said, we will take the signature, put it inside a variable, and after that we will unset this signature. What I mean by unset, or what I'm doing here is as I said, removing the signature key and value from the response. Now the next thing is doing the array filter in order to remove any, let's say, empty parameters. Then I will do the sorting. Once the sorting is done, I will generate the URL encoded query that I will use to hash and compare with my signature. So I just done this HTTP build query URL encoding, and once it's built successfully, now I have the encoded data. I have my server key. As you can see, I've brought my server key over here, and finally I have the signature that I have unsetted from the response. Now I will take those three values and pass it to another function over here, which make my hash. It takes the hash, the SHA-256 hash, it takes my server key, as a key for the hashing, and it takes the data that we just encoded. Now, once the hash is done, simply what I want to do is to compare this final hash along with the signature I received from my response over here. Now, if they are the same, it will return true, and if they are not the same, it will return false. Now, let's check everything out over here, and this, can you see inside my controller, I am not doing any return or any return unless the verified is true. If it's not true, I will abort and I will have my page to die in a 404. Now let's get back to our payment over here. Let's test it out again. Get back to my home page. Now I fill out my payment. Choose PayTabs. Proceed to payment. Now I will fill out my details over here. I'll click on Pay, authenticate it, and as you can see here, my return has been done successfully. Now, if this is not the case, if any of this parameter is not the correct one, either the server key, either the signature receiving, even if this signature had not been received at all, if you received an empty response, any of this case will return the value false. And if this happened, I will not do anything and I will not do the return URL that I have just done. So this is simply how you can verify that this response or this return URL is the correct one for you and it's coming from PayTabs. Now we can move to the next part.